Hey guys, Buildzoid here, and this will be a quick little video where, well, quick and little. This will be a video where I'll explain how to overclock FX CPUs on a Gigabyte motherboard, because there isn't a video on YouTube as of right now. People still don't know how to overclock FX CPUs with all the internet, like, guides floating around Google, and I need more views. So let's get to this. Do please ignore my kitchen, okay? Just ignore it. It's not there. Let's take a look at the system I'll be running. So this is a Fantex PHTC 14P. Roughly the same power as an Noctua NHD 14. I have it fan swapped for a 2.5K RPM fan, so it's a little better than a Noctua NHD 14 at this point. The CPU I'm running an FX 9590. This basically just means I'm not going to be able to overclock it very far because this is already a really, really fast CPU. It's basically, as clockwise, it's almost at the limit. The motherboard, it's a 990 FX Gaming from Gigabyte, obviously. It uses Gigabyte's latest UEFI BIOS for the AMD platform. As far as I'm aware, that BIOS is a little bit behind what they have on the Intel side, but if your motherboard basically is a UD3 or a UD3P or any of the better boards from Gigabyte, the newer ones, it should have a UEFI BIOS, and you'll know that you have a UEFI BIOS after you see what my BIOS looks like, and you can just compare that. If they look roughly the same, you have a UEFI. If you don't have a similar looking BIOS, you don't have a UEFI BIOS, and this guide is mostly irrelevant for you as for where stuff like options are located, which kind of sucks. So then that's the motherboard rundown. I'm using a V1000 power supply, which you can't see because I'm an idiot with the camera. There, so that's my V1000 from Cooler Master. I have 4 gigs of RAM here, 2 gig sticks a piece. G-Skills 1600 megahertz, CL7 1.6 volts. They have an XMP profile, so I'll show you how to, enable XMP on these motherboards. Now, one thing to note with Gigabyte motherboards, don't on AM3 Plus, don't buy RAM that's clocked at 2133 or 2400. It won't work. These motherboards are only spec'd to go up to 2000, and 2000 is not a native ratio, so basically 1866 is where these things top out. You can clock them manually further, but it's really, really hard. So I just, recommend that if you're watching a video targeted to beginners like this one, don't get higher, like more advanced, like 2400 or 2133 RAM. The graphics card's a GTX 570, and that's all you really need to know about it. And I'm running the operating system of an SSD. So I'll move you down so you can see the screen, and let's get this thing booted up. Hopefully. There we go. Focus. Damn it. There we go. Of course it can work. Let's get this started up, and overclocking on Gigabyte's new motherboards is actually super simple. So I just have the BIOS cleaned out so that it's all stock settings. Press the del button to just get into the BIOS. You should know how to do this at this point. So first things first, and I need to adjust a few camera settings, so give me a moment. Let's see. Nope. Oh, that's not helping. There we go. Okay, so you can kind of read these now. You can sorta maybe see the settings that I have on there. Let's see, can I do, no, stay there. Yep. No. Ah, damn it. There we go. I really need a capture card. There. Okay, that's about as good as it'll get, I think. Okay, so let's get to the actual overclocking. You can use a mouse in the BIOS, but I don't recommend it. First things first, enable XMP if you have XMP enabled RAM. So you can just do that from advanced memory settings. That's the third option on the MIT menu, and profile 1. That's all you have to do. If your XMP profile works, that's everything you'll have to do. And, that's all you should do. So let's now save settings and reset. And the camera decided to go screw itself. Give me a second. Alright, I'll just disable autofocus. Stupid camera. There we go. Boom. Hopefully that didn't ruin the video. Okay, so now you can see that right here it's a 1600, or well, you can see that says 1600 now, and the CPU is still at 4.7 gigahertz. So let's get to the actual CPU side of things. First, voltages. For normal I'm just gonna do this like this isn't a 9590, so I'll start you off with like baseline settings. So you'd want to start at about 1.35 volts for vCore, or 1.3 depending on what kind of cooling you have. And this is just a good baseline starting point for any motherboard, uh, any cooling, really, because this is like basically stock settings. And then you're going to go down to your last option, which is load line calibration, and you're going to set that to medium. So that's the third setting. So it starts at auto, then you press shift, and then you use the plus button to adjust it. So yeah, you just go 1, that's normal, extreme, medium. There. That's the setting you need. So that's all now configured. Then you go to your advanced frequency settings, and this first time around you're going to have to disable a few things. So first of all, there's your turbo ratio, disable that. CPU unlock, that's for phenoms, you can ignore that. Cool and quiet, disable. C1E, disable. Just for stress testing purposes, disable all the uh, you know, power savings features. SVM, that's a virtualization technology. If you use virtual machines, you'd want to keep it enabled, but if you don't, you can disable it and there's no real issues. CPU core control, that's how many cores your CPU has enabled. Don't mess with it if you want all the cores that you have. Core C6 state, disabled. And APM is another power management, so disable that as well. HPC mode will be disabled by default, and that's for basically data center style computing, because the FX series is basically a stripped down server CPU. So a good baseline to start off with would be 4 gigahertz. So I'm just going to set it right down to 20 on the ratio for the CPU, which you'll see also changed here. And now it'll start up at 4 gigahertz, 1.3 volts core voltage. So I'll just take it all the way to Windows now and show you that all the settings applied. There we go. That's crashed because I couldn't be bothered with letting it restart properly. So this install of Windows is a little bit stripped down because I usually use it for benchmarking, but it'll work. Just need to wait for the mouse to wake up, and there we go. So for temperature monitoring on AMD CPUs, I like to use core temp, and of course you can't see anything again. Let's get the big blue box. I should have given up on trying to use a tripod for this at this point, but oh well, it was worth trying. There we go. You can sorta zoom it out a bit. There we go. Okay, yeah, now you can see my whole Windows screen, even if it's still really bad. There. Yep, that's actually decent. Let's see. Yeah, okay, that'll work. So for temperature monitoring, I recommend using core temp. Down here you have your CPU temperature. Right now it's reading 8 degrees, which is wrong. And this is a common bug on basically all temperature monitoring software for AMD CPUs. At idle, it will read all kinds of random crap. That isn't the real temperature. So basically, as long as we're not running under any load, we have no idea what temperature the CPU is at. Once it gets, once it starts working or gets hotter, it'll start being more accurate. You could also use AMD Overdrive, but for some reason I can't get that thing to work, and I can't be bothered figuring out why it doesn't want to work. If you have a normal, undestroyed, like not messed up Windows install, it should work right out of the box. So, I'm just going to use Cinebench, because it'll show performance increases from overclocking the CPU. Also, to make sure that you have your frequency and everything set up, use CPU-Z. So here you can clearly see 4 gigahertz. That's your HT link right there. That's your FSB. So that should be always at 200. Don't play with that. There's no reason to play with that. Multiplier, so that's 20. So 20 times 200 gives us 4 gigahertz here. Memory. Memory says 800 here, and that's because CPU-Z takes the physical clock, not the effective clock. So because DDR3 stands for double data rate, basically it means it transfers 2 bits of data. It can transfer 2 bits of data per clock cycle. So it's called, so at 800 megahertz, it's actually doing 1600 ticks of data. So that's why here it says 800, but the sticks are rated for DDR3 1600. So DDR3 1600 is 800 megahertz in reality. So that's that. And of course the timings are 787, which is correct. This core voltage readout, right now it's pretty accurate, but just ignore it for the most part, because this thing is not actually accurate for in most situations, but we'll have it on the side just to see. I usually check my voltages with a digital multimeter, but I do understand that for most people that's not an option. So just, if you're following this guide, then I already told you to just set the LLC to medium, and from there never set the core voltage above 1.55 volts, and you'll be safe. So you don't really need to care what voltage it's actually running at, as long you'll still be safe. If you were doing something more advanced, then having proper voltage readings is useful, but they're kind of a pain to get with software because software is a bit messy. So let's finally run Cinebench. So yeah, and as I said, now the temperatures are starting to look somewhat more reasonable. We got 28 degrees here and 28 there, which is actually in line with what I expect for a cooler this ridiculously oversized. Especially with how much the CPU, like how low voltage the CPU is running. And actually, CPU-Z seems to be doing a good job because that's in line with my digital multimeter readings for right now. So yeah, as long as you have the LLC set to medium, this is going to be more or less accurate. But if you set a higher LLC level, it'll be all over the place. Especially with extreme LLC, core voltage readouts get really, really, really dodgy in software. And the lower LLC settings are just, well, they drop a ton of voltage, so I don't recommend using them. So just stick to medium. Medium's the best. So we got a score, 6.85 points. Cinebench is not a stress test, but it's good for illustrating that it is at least somewhat stable, and how much of an impact the overclock has had on CPU performance. So now let's restart the system. And increase some settings. So always just increase one ratio at a time. So from 20 to 20.5 and then, up. So that's all I'm going to increase right now. Save changes and exit and just boot back into Windows. Right, so as an alternative to Cinebench, I'd recommend using, well, stability is very much largely in the eye of the beholder in a way, sort of like, so it's like, I'd consider anything that passes like 6 or 7 runs of Cinebench in a row more or less stable. But some people prefer to test with like 24 hours of Prime 95 or something. I don't think you need to go quite that insane with your stress testing. The heaviest testing I usually do is just a little bit of IBT, which is short for Intel burn test, which actually works really well on FX CPUs, though it's a bit of a mess on Haswell and other platforms. So let's close that and run Signbench again. Hopefully we'll see a decent score increase right out of the gate, and maybe it'll crash. So let's monitor temperatures again. I don't think it'll actually get hot enough for the temperatures to matter. Oh, and I should have checked with CPU-Z what frequency. Well, core temp's actually correct. So it's like if core temp was giving weird frequency readings, then you'd check with CPU-Z, but as long as it's sort of in line with what you expect, you can just go with core temp. CPU-Z is just that much better at well, it's built specifically to read CPU frequency. That's the main purpose it was built for. Um, so it tends to if there's any kind of issue with reading frequency, CPU-Z will usually give you the correct readings, unless you're trying on purpose to fake readings in CPU-Z, which is doable, but if you're just doing daily overclocking, I don't know why you'd want to do that. Yeah, so now we've gone right over 7 at this point, and everything is still, 32 degrees maximum temperature, so everything is nice and stable still, nice and cool. You want to stop? Yes. No. So we'll restart again and increase the multiplier. And really, just testing with Cinebench like this when you're working your way up is actually completely acceptable for just quick stability testing, because you obviously don't want to test for, say, 10 minutes every multiplier increase, because you'd be sitting there all day, and that's a giant waste of your time. So there, now we're at 4.2 gigahertz, save and exit in. So I actually tested this system, and eventually it should hit about 4.9 gigahertz. I didn't push it all the way to 5 because I sort of ran out of voltage. I think I was using around 1.525 for 4.9 gigahertz and still wasn't quite stable, so yeah, and I still haven't told you what the safe temperature for FX CPUs is. So let's get well, Windows cooperate, please. I really need to start getting decent installs for videos. There we go. All right, so safe temperatures for FX CPUs. You just want to keep them under 70 degrees in core temp, and as long as you're under that, you're fine. I do basically all my temperature checking with core temp, and I've never had an FX chip die on me yet. So, you know, and I like thrash my CPUs. So if I haven't killed one, then you're not gonna kill one doing the same thing. Um, so yeah, so core temp's at 4.2 gigahertz. Everything's nice and good there. So let's run Cinebench. Do note that the maximum temperature is gonna, well, I expect it to climb up compared to last test. So just increasing your CPU frequency will increase your power draw. So yeah, your temperatures will go up with just frequency alone. So yeah, last time it finished at 33 degrees and now it's at 33. Well, 32 last time and now it's at 33. So that's normal. There we go, 7.28 points, so everything is still fine. Performance is going up. If you see a big dip in Cinebench scores, it usually means that you're unstable. Also, if increasing core voltage helps your Cinebench score significantly, that also means you're unstable. Um, not stable enough, not unstable enough to crash quite yet, but unstable nonetheless. Really, if you use something like Intel burn test to stress test with, you won't see the that kind of behavior. So yeah. So let's just keep increasing frequency. Right. There we go. You know what? I'm going to speed this up a little. Let's go 200 megahertz at a time so that you're not sitting here all day. Um, this is already 20 minutes long, though I do recommend everybody watch my video sped up slightly because I try not to talk so fast that you couldn't watch it sped up. Hopefully it'll crash now, because I could just skip to the point where it crashes and, yeah, pack up. There we go. Let's just get this open up again. There. Well, I was hoping it would crash at this point, but it's still stable. No, wait, no. Okay, no, it's fine. So yeah, temperatures are up again, 34 degrees this time. So you more or less get a degree per 100 megahertz. And that's with this cooler. I'm surprised this still works. Oh well, yep, you can see again score increased nicely, so let's keep pushing it. Just restart and keep going up. So next up is 4.6 gigahertz, because I'm going to speed up and do it at 200 megahertz steps at a time. If you have like really overkill cooling, you can just sort of copy what I'm doing here where you skip steps. Wait, no, delete. Damn it. I let it get to Windows. Give me a second. Go. Okay, so back to the frequency settings and pull them up to 4.6. This probably won't work at this point. So let's see. Yep. So now, oh wait, it's still booting. Well, that's surprising. Oh well. Ever, I'll just boot it manually. And it looks like it crashed. Finally, I thought I wouldn't get a crash on this video. Oh, nope, no, it survived. Damn it. Okay, but at this point it should be really, really unstable, so... Uh, yep, something's wrong. So apparently, half the, like, you can see here that several of the cores aren't even running at full speed. And let's see if they pass Cinebench. I think it's going to crash. Just straight up crash. But yeah, at this point, it's obviously not working properly because it's not fully stable. which isn't surprising. I didn't think it would do 4.6 on 1.3 volts. So let's try run this. It's just gonna run them really slow. Well, that's surprising. Unless core temp's being weird. Let's see, I'll try open it up again. Nope, those frequencies are definitely down. Well, we'll know from the score if there's something weird going on. But, you know, this is already, that already says there's a problem somewhere. So by the time this finishes, if the score is lower than it was before, then yeah, it just confirms that there's something wrong. And we'll probably have to go into the BIOS and raise core voltage. So this is actually unique to Gigabyte motherboards. I've never seen another motherboard do this, where they would boot up and have like, your cores would just all slow the hell down, but that's interesting. Yep, as you can see, the score is atrociously low. So those frequencies are indeed completely, like, yeah, everything is broken. So let's go back into the BIOS and try fix things. No thanks. And oops, I just let it shut down. Oh, I'm gonna have to reach for it. There we go. So yeah, I believe that's just going to be a case of give it more voltage now and it'll come right back. I thought it would honestly just crash on boot up, which would have been what most motherboards do, but this is a Gigabyte, so it didn't. So let's just go to advanced voltage settings and give it 1.35. Voltage increments, usually you should go by 25 millivolts, but I'll be doing that once we're sort of at the limits of this cooling system. I've been slowly sliding the camera. Um, okay, wake the hell up, Windows. There we go. Let's see what core temp tells us. And yep, now our frequencies are back in check, so whatever instability there was is now gone. Though that does not mean the system is fully stable yet, it just means it's running at the right frequencies. So now let's see if it'll pass Cinebench. And it just crashed, so trying to move the mouse, not moving the mouse, system's dead. So what do? We just press the reset button and go into the BIOS and give it more voltage. It really is that simple. There's nothing more to it. So tried 1.35 before, so let's try 1.4 now. The maximum voltage you would really want to give an FX CPU is 1.55 volts, but 1.55 volts is nightmarishly hard to cool. Like, really, really hard to cool. Like, even this heatsink that I'm running can't well, I haven't actually tested if it'll deal with it, but I suspect it won't. Um, like, I have an FX 6350 in another system and it couldn't deal with it. So, though I think the mount on that was dodgy, so I don't know. Another thing, the maximum core voltage that you can feed your system also is going to be a bit tied to the quality of motherboard you have. If you have a really crappy motherboard, uh, don't uh, don't give it 1.5 volts. Well, don't go over 1.4 volts really. Like 1.42 is safe for most AMD motherboards. There's some motherboards that like come with their own internal protection systems. There's a lot of them that don't, and those will just catch fire if you give them too much voltage. So yeah, you want to be careful with those. If you're unsure about a motherboard, just ask on some forums somewhere if it's adequate enough. Um, Usually people will be able to help you. You can even drop a comment down below this video and, I'll answer any questions. Like I went and tested some really dodgy motherboards specifically to see what kind of like what they can handle. So, so yeah, if you think your motherboard is bad and well, if your motherboard is relatively cheap by AMD by AM3 Plus standards, it's probably pretty bad. So ask just in case, or just Google it on the just Google it. Google if anybody's had VRM issues with it or something, because you really don't want to burn up your motherboard with too much voltage. And this is only really a risk if you have a really bad motherboard and a really good cooler, because usually your CPU cooling should stop you first. So yeah, now the score is all fine. System didn't crash. Everything is happy. 43 degrees on the CPU, so that's still safe. Um, More, no need. And I was hoping this video would be quick, and now it's 31 minutes long. Yeah, but for Gigabyte, if you have the this gaming motherboard, then you're safe up to 1.55 volts. If you have a UD3, which is basically this with a few less features, 1.55 volts is safe. Uh, Unless you have the old revisions. There's a few revisions of the UD3 which were really bad. There we go, so 4.7 gigahertz. The UD3P, I wouldn't push it above 1.45 volts, and um, the GA, there's the 78 LMT, but that thing isn't relevant to this video because it doesn't even use the same BIOS, and it won't even let you give it too much voltage. I have that board. I tried it. That board is actually pretty idiot-proof, which is surprising. Though it's a really bad board. At least it won't let you burn it. Okay. Did it? No, the mouse is happy. There we go. Close that. Open core temp, run. And that just crashed again, which is nice. So again, go straight to the BIOS and give it more voltage. And you'll basically be giving it more voltage until you either run out of more voltage, which is, if you hit 1.55 volts, don't give it more, or you hit 70 degrees in core temp when you run whatever stress test you choose. So I'll just give it 1.45. And there we go. Open up core temp again. Open up Cinebench and let's run it. Yeah, okay, now the cooler's starting to kick in. You can't hear it, but I can, so. Yeah, so 46 degrees, 47, still climbing. I think it'll hit around 50-ish. There we go, that finished. Now it's scoring over 8 points. So, yeah. Would you like to save your benchmark score? No thanks. And restart. So we're sort of getting into the last stretch of available frequency on this CPU. It's not going to go much further than this. So this next one's going to be for sure unstable. Yep. I wonder if this one will even boot. Oh yeah, it'll boot. So in case for whatever reason your motherboard stops booting, I'll actually show you that after I'm done with the overclocking. So yeah. If you have any questions, you can drop them, down in the comments under the video. I'll be happy to reply to them. I have way too much free time. There we go. I'm expecting a quick crash here because, yep, so everything's now at 4.8 gigahertz as claimed by CoreTemp. Let's run this and it should be, mouse is moving, and there, it just crashed. So reset. And go back to the BIOS and give it more voltage. And I am taking very liberal jumps with the voltage. So if you have worse cooling, take it slower so that you don't hit the cooling limit so quickly. But I don't really have a limit here. I should have probably done this with a Hyper 212 Evo, which I do have, but I prefer the install for this. Go back in Windows. Give me a second. Come on. There we go. So CoreTemp. Let's check that voltage with CPU-Z. I wonder if it'll still be accurate. Yep, 1.5 right now, which is actually correct. And go. Let's run this. Pull it to the side. Yep, that's actually basically in line with my digital multimeter. I'm surprised. This is usually super inaccurate. Oh well. But still, only rely on this as long as you're using the medium LLC, because extreme LLC I've tested and it's not consistent in the slightest. So yeah, so now we're hitting around 53 degrees. It's all well and good. 54. And there we go. So score still increased. Everything's still stable. So now we're at 4.8 gigahertz. So this is actually a really good overclock for most FX CPUs. Most FX chips should hit 4.8 between 1.45 and 1.5 volts. If you have a really good CPU, you can hit it on less than 1.45. This is about average to slightly, well, this is about average, but then again, I'm not running minimized voltages, and this chip is slightly above average, so just a little bit though. It's not very significant how much better it'll go. Okay, so this should be the end of where I can push this system to. See if this saves and resets. Still booting. You know what? I'll show you what to do when you can't get the system to boot later. Um, well, basically after this run of Cinebench, because this will crash, then I'll raise the voltage, then that'll work. But I won't have any more voltage left, so well, actually I can show you one last little trick. So let's open up Cinebench. Boom. This will crash almost immediately. There we go. 3, 2, 1, and there we go. I didn't even get to 1, and it crashed. So let's restart it. Give it more voltage, and that'll more or less be the end of the overclocking part of the video, and then I'll show you the the one major issue you might run into. So advanced voltage, and I'll just give it straight 1.55 at this point, and that's the end basically. So I can't go above this voltage. Anything above this voltage is going to be unsafe for the CPU, and basically that means it's not gonna, up and die instantly. It's not gonna explode, catch fire, or whatever. Basically, if you run your CPU above 1.55 volts for extended periods of time, the CPU will basically get unstable, and you'll need to give it more voltage for the same frequency. So, you know, if you need 1.6 volts for 5 gigahertz. In 3 months, you might need 1.62 volts for 5 gigahertz. And then in 3 months after that, you might need 1.66 volts for 5 gigahertz. And, you'll steadily be raising the voltage up and up and up and up and up. And eventually, it will just die. It's not instantaneous, but eventually, you will get the CPU to die. So, yeah, going above 1.55 volts is not advisable. For a lot of motherboards and for a lot of cooling systems, 1.55 volts is completely unreasonable because you can't cool it or the motherboard can't deal with it. It can't provide it. It'll damage the motherboard. Um, so yeah, but if you have a 990 FX board, you can usually run 1.55. Certainly, if you have either the UD3 revision 4, revision 5, or this motherboard right here, the 990 FX-Gaming, you can run 1.55 volts, assuming you have enough cooling. So let's save and exit. And get into Windows and finally see the end temperatures. There we go. There we go. So the mouse is alive now. Close that. Let's see the final temperatures. I think at this point it should, well, it might just get over 60. So let's run this. And yeah, it's 57, 58. The heatsink's really starting to work now. 59. Yeah, so if I was running something heavier than Cinebench at this point, it wouldn't be able to keep up. So if you were running a proper stress test, yeah, then yeah, this cooler isn't enough for 1.55 volts. And yep, it crashed. So it can't even do this. So even with 1.55 volts, it can't do 4.9 gigahertz. So basically, you would back it back down to the last combination that worked, and the last combination that worked was 1.5 volts at 4.8 gigahertz. So that would be your stable overclock. You could try to push it a little bit further, by which I mean you could pull it down to that, and then give yourself a small boost like this. So just add 2 megahertz to your BCLK clock control or FSB. That this name is going to change based on the motherboard. So yeah, just add 2 megahertz to that. That'll give you about half a gigahertz on no, that'll give you about 50 megahertz on your CPU frequency, and you know it'll increase your RAM ratio by a tenth of the current speed. So because well, no, not even a tenth, 1%. Yeah, it basically gives you a small little boost, and this should be stable if 4.9 gigahertz didn't work. And this will be just about the maximum overclock you can push. This is like the absolute maximum you can do there, and it's booting. But really, if you're having any trouble with getting stable at like with the 2 extra megahertz on the front side bus or the FSB, just give up on it. It's really not worth it. It's literally just 50 megahertz on top, so you'll actually see the score difference after this finally works. There we go. It's literally 1% more performance than 4.8 gigahertz, so there. And I'll just open up core temp just so you see the temperatures. And there we go. So before it was like 8.2 something, and now it's at 8.33. So really not that big an increase in performance, but you know, it's still relatively stable, relatively cool. So if you want the absolute limit, you can give it, you know, 1 or 2 megahertz extra FSB, and that'll give you the absolute maximum that you can get. I just want to quit this at this point. Yes. So yeah, and because of the increase in FSB, you'll also see 808 on the memory. So that's that. So that's basically how to successfully overclock, you know, an FX system, well, an FX CPU on a Gigabyte motherboard. Um, now I'll show you the one thing that like didn't come up in this video just through the normal process. Um, say your hand slips, right? You're like tired or whatever, and you go into your advanced frequency settings, and this is back on auto, and you just go like, oops, that's not gonna, you know. So now it's gonna try boot up with 6.4 gigahertz. What's gonna happen? Well, it's not gonna explode, so you don't have to worry about that. Point you right at the system over there. It's a bit dark because of the camera settings, so here's proof that I'm not actually changed anything in the background. As you can see, no explosions. Well, it's off right now. Now it's going to try to boot. And still no explosions, but it's not going to boot up for a bit. Gigabyte's motherboards do have, this motherboard has dual BIOS. I think the UD3 as well has dual BIOS. And basically, if you let the motherboard just deal with itself for a bit, it should boot right up. If you don't have patience, yep. See? So there we go. It booted right up. And it's not going to boot 6.4 gigahertz. It's going to give you this boot failure detected message where the system has blah, 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 whatever. This will happen if you have bad RAM settings, bad whatever settings. So then you're going to go load optimize defaults, then reboot, or load optimize defaults, then boot. Or this'll throw you to Windows. This'll restart the system. This'll let you enter the BIOS. If you choose to enter the BIOS, you will notice that it kept your settings for everything. So your profile is still saved, this is still saved, and you can go and fix your stupid mistake. There we go, and it's stable again. No problems, right? So slip of the hand on that, no issue. If your hand slips on the voltage, that's a bit more of an issue, but that's not going to be a good day. So I recommend you double check your voltage numbers, because if your hand slips and you put in this, well, that's pretty much a one-way ticket to the grave for your CPU. And I'm not going to demonstrate that because I like this FX 9590. I'd like to keep it alive for as long as possible. So that's that. That's all you need to know about it. Assuming your motherboard doesn't manage to recover, which I can't imagine what you'd have to do to get it to not recover. Gigabyte motherboards are really, really good at recovering themselves from user error. So yeah, let's just reset this. And I'll show you how to recover the motherboard if you've royally screwed up. Like screwed up so hard that the motherboard can't deal with how bad you are at overclocking. So let's see, get you a little bit more light there. So yeah, system's booting right up right now. I'm just gonna tell it to shut down. And that's now turned off. So we need to wipe the BIOS, right? Whatever settings you put in just won't boot at all. It can't even fix itself because you're just that good at breaking things. Well, there's a fail-safe, well, mostly fail-safe way to fix BIOS boot up issues. Pull out your graphics card. Well, I didn't even have to pull out the graphics card for this one. But some motherboards you'll need to pull out the graphics card. Depends really on your motherboard. You want to locate this round thing. That's your CMOS battery. That's the battery that keeps your BIOS settings. This thing keeps your BIOS settings alive, you know, because the memory, like the memory technology used for BIOSes is just that ancient. It needs to be battery backed because it's not just regular flash. So you just pull this out, keep it pulled out for a couple seconds, like 10, 20, 30. You can also power off your power supply just to make sure. Wait for a bit. Eventually this LED on the board, usually just waiting for the LED to go out on your board will be fine. If you don't have an LED, just wait for like 30 seconds or 20 seconds. I'm not even going to let it go out because that's going to take forever at this rate. So I'm just going to put it back right in. Yeah, so it discharged at this point. Power it back up. And now it'll start with a blank BIOS. Yep, so that will start right up with no settings saved, and I will show you that all the settings are gone as soon as it decides to load up. So let's get that dark again. Oops, I forgot to put in the graphics card. I am an idiot, aren't I? Well, that's what I get for making videos at 1 in the freaking morning. Well, no, it's 2 at this point, isn't it? I am very smart. There, so now that there's a graphics card in the system, it'll boot up with a wiped BIOS. Oh crap, I forgot to plug in the... Okay, so now the graphics card's actually properly seated in the PCIe slot and actually has power cables. Now it'll boot up. There, that's a lot more like it, isn't it? And I'm still waiting for that monitor to go green. There we go. See? Boots right back up. And now the BIOS will be wiped out, so... Yeah. So it'll even send you straight to Windows because the BIOS is wiped out. Bash the del button like a crazy person. I'll delete key. And it's the BIOS, is it not? Seriously? It's going to be problematic now? Okay, well, no matter. I can just reset it. There we go. Yeah. Wait, it's... Okay, well, I didn't remove the battery for long enough, because all my settings are still there. That's not good, is it? I'm pretty sure I said I wanted to wipe the BIOS out, but that just failed. Now, considering I haven't had a situation where I couldn't get this motherboard to recover yet, I don't think I don't want to say it's a worrying thing, but yeah, if you really, really, really want to wipe the BIOS, you'll pull the battery out and just let it sit for ages. You know, just let the sit, like, if you have the time, you can let it sit overnight, and at that point, it should most certainly be wiped out. Um, I have no idea why this didn't work the first time, but yeah. So let's quickly recap before you finish up this video. All the settings you need. Advanced frequency settings, extreme memory profile. You know, you either have an XMP profile or you don't. So if you have one, enable it. If you don't have one, don't worry about the setting. Advanced CPU core features. You will want to, I'm just going to load the optimized defaults. Advanced frequency settings again, advanced CPU core features. So you'll want to disable this, you'll want to disable that, disable this, disable that as well, unless you're running virtual machines. This is for virtual machines. Disable it if you don't want to run any virtual machines. You can disable this as well, that's just more power savings. And disable that, that's power management software. And, you know, disable all that, ignore this. And here you can set your CPU core clock. That's what you're going to use to set it, though you'll never have to see it in that menu because you can use it from here. So yeah, whatever CPU core clock you want to set, you can set it from this menu here. For voltages, you only have to worry about core voltage. Don't go over 1.55. That's the maximum limit. And start at 1.3 at 4 gigahertz. 1.3 at 4 gigahertz is, you know, what most FX CPUs should be able to do. If you want to start a little bit higher with your voltage, you can start at 1.35. Your load line calibration, this last setting, you will set it to medium. Why? Because extreme is extreme and useless. Normal is useless. And low is useless. Standard is also useless. Just use medium. I've tested all the other ones. They're not worth running for any reason at all. Just use medium. Medium is all you'll ever need. Medium is the best. Medium is life. Medium is love. So that's that. There's really not much else to it. You know, enable your XMP, set up your LLC setting, and then raise the ratio and raise the core voltage until you don't have enough cooling. Thank you for watching. And I'll just turn this off without saving the settings. I don't really care about them. So, there. Thanks for watching the video. If you still have questions about literally anything overclocking related, then, you know, ask in the comments down below. If you liked the video, thumbs up button. If you disliked the video, dislike the, well, you know, there's a thumbs down button, I guess. What else? Right, there will be a review of this motherboard up on the blog sometime soon. I still need to do photos. And yeah, like, share, subscribe. And oh yeah, and one last thing, if you want me to cover other motherboards or just do more content of any kind you can think of, you can, you know, you can donate through a button on the blog. I'm going to end this video just under an hour long. Thank you for watching and goodbye.